capture greenhouse gases from the air and put them into land, whether those are in forests, they're in working land environments like agriculture, croplands, rangelands, and also how to figure out new pathways to produce materials that no longer create pollution hazards in the environment, things like mobile biochar. So these were launched as innovation centers that bring together a huge constellation of researchers from many different disciplines, including social scientists, economists, natural scientists, soil biogeochemists, forest ecologists, engineers, so on and so forth. And each of the projects or innovation centers is focusing on a different array of technologies or management practices. Some are focused on soil interventions that can produce many benefits for growing crops better with less water and also capturing carbon and securing it in the soil. Others are focused on biochar, so charring material in a way that can produce products that are beneficial for hazardous waste remediation or soil conservation and soil health. And then another innovation center that's focused on wildfire carbon biomass, water that we get from our hill slopes and mountains in California, which ultimately trickle down to feeding the general population in agriculture. So each of these innovation centers were funded by the Strategic Growth Council. Again, they amass a huge number of researchers, but the key element behind them is engagement. So this is not research for publication, this is research for impact. And the study that I'm involved in, which I'm leading, is called the Working Land Innovation Center. In particular, we're focused on projects that are over 100 acres in scale, working with real farmers, ranchers on these interventions so we can see the kind of economic returns they get. And then we're going in and quantifying carbon capture, which is obviously a global benefit. The big picture on this, before I turn the mic over, is if you look at the Paris Climate Agreement, we have to have global emissions, so in other words, cut them in half each decade moving forward, which is a Herculean task. But what makes it a double Herculean task is we also have to pull out 10 billion tons of CO2 from the air each year, starting no later than 2050. So these projects are all centered on how do we solve that problem? Can we crack the code in California? And in so doing, can we scale out these innovations more broadly?
So, Asmaret, can you talk a bit about what kind of some of the specific challenges are, both for the actual capture and perhaps, what has happened at the different centers? Thank you.
Yes. So all these three projects are focused on thinking about sustainably managing natural and ecosystems as well as working lands in California to achieve multiple benefits, including benefits for carbon capture from the atmosphere, as well as maximizing ecosystem services from each of these ecosystems. So Ben mentioned the Working Lands Innovation Center, which is thinking a lot about grasslands and agricultural systems and how we can manage them better to improve their ability to sequester atmospheric carbon dioxide, but also lead to benefits for improved soil water use efficiency in soil, improved yields, and multiple other co-benefits. Mike's leading a project that's thinking about forest ecosystems, in particular thinking about these array of challenges that forest ecosystems have encountered over the last years and decades, having to do with droughts, fires, massive tree die-offs, and the implication for that, not just from the purpose of carbon capture, but also thinking about water supply issues downstream, for example. And then Gerardo's leading a project focused on thinking about biochar application, again, for multiple co-benefits of managing large amounts of waste from excess agricultural and forest waste, as well as manure from animal production systems.
Of methane from the dairy, you're utilizing the biomass, so you don't have to burn it, and you're also putting it on the soil so that you can reduce the fluxes there. If you look at, we're concentrating in California, so if you look at the aspect of communities that are involved, a lot of those issues happen in areas where you have low incomes or you have disadvantaged communities, communities that are vulnerable to, say, asthma because of pollutants and things like that. So we're really trying to operate in the areas where you have the most benefits. Not only if you remove the odor from the dairies, for instance, that's an impact directly to benefit to some of these communities. But also, if you can train them to actually generate the biochar that can be used in their own area, or if you can tell them how to operate with some of the technologies for producing biochar, how to maintain them and things like that, you're giving them some sort of tools that they didn't have right now. And I think that's something that we're really interested in.
Yeah, I'm Mike Golden. I'm at UC Irvine, and our innovation center is focused on forest management. I'm really happy to be part of this group, and one of the things I think is so exciting about this group is that it's really moving in the solutions direction. I know Ben and myself, I know less your background, Gerardo, but Ben and myself have been working on identifying the threat of climate change. That's really where our field has been the last 20 years. Okay, we succeeded. It's a tremendous threat. And the field now is moving on to, can you do anything about it? What actually are the solutions? And that's the challenge that all of these innovation centers are facing. The center I'm involved in is focusing on forest management across the Western North America. California, sure, but it's a bigger problem. We have a tremendous issue, and it's a coupled issue. We have problems with water quantity, ensuring enough water moving forward. We have problems with wildfire. We have problems with ecosystem health, forests dying off. And these forests are sinks or pools of carbon. We would like to maintain those and mitigate warming as much as we can. These are all linked, and the thing is, when you manage for one of these, you're inadvertently managing for all of them. And so really our goal is to develop management strategies where we can have our cake, we can eat our cake too, and we can save our cake for tomorrow and the next day. We want to develop management strategies which maybe isn't absolutely best in one of those, but is as good as we can get it in all of them. And so that's the vision, and we would like to information to managers and let them use it and make best decisions possible.
Thank you so much. I have a rather provocative question, actually, which is, so you have captured these emissions, you've brought them down, you've composted them, et cetera. Is this a permanent solution? Or is this instead something that becomes part of a circuit, right? So as there are new emissions, you capture them again, they come back. One of the things that I remember from science courses is that, it is a circuit, right? The emissions never permanently go away. So I don't know which of you would like to speak to that, but I think understanding, is this kind of a permanent center setup where you will, continue to implement and innovate and all that, or is this something where you are setting up systems and just kind of seeing how it goes?
Well, so just 2 points on that. Number one, we're trying to create the conditions that allow for sustainable innovation. So in other words, rather than thinking about how can I perform a research experiment, which is useful and might produce some PhDs, which is a good thing, we're saying, how can we create the conditions where we have commercialization and small business development working with us from the beginning? How can we create the conditions where, in our case, we're working with tribes in California who are some of the most amazing land stakeholders that have existed for thousands of years? How can we use their knowledge? And so a lot of it is about bidirectional, moving beyond the sort of traditional confines of academia, saying, I have research, here it is, do something about it, into you tell us, and let's work together on these demonstrations. So in that sense, we are trying to create something that is more permanent or has permanence to it. In terms of carbon, there's nothing permanent. But some of the interventions will lock up carbon for 10 to 15 years. Some of the interventions we're working on may lock up carbon for thousands of years. But we need all those things operating together to solve the challenge.
How have your various communities of interaction enjoyed working with scientists and academics on this? Have they been receptive? Have they said, well, no, we know how to do things? I know in some industries, people are quite resistant to change, particularly if it's something where they don't necessarily concretely see it, like a gas, right? So if one of you would like to speak to that, that would be great.
It's been actually pretty interesting because at least the project that we're working on, we have people from academia, we have people from small companies, we have farmers, we have low-income communities, and having all of them working together, it can be a challenge, but it's also very rewarding. And I think the main thing is not to come saying like, oh, we're the academics and this is what you're going to be doing or something like that. Everybody has to put their point of view. There's a lot of things that we don't know that happen in the actual operational part of the solution that we learn and we say, oh, well, we have to take that into account. So we've been able to coordinate and communicate in an effective way, but listening is very, very important. Mm-hmm.
Hi. What about opportunities for new people to enter the system? Opportunities for grad students, postdocs, early career researchers, and also, entry-level staff and interns. How have the millennials and the Gen Z kind of been brought into the system?
I think that the challenges that we face are so huge that intellectually there's room. There's so much room for people who have good ideas and things that they would like to pitch, like to try out. I can imagine in 20, 30 years a pretty rich industry built up around climate change adaptation and climate change mitigation. I can see a lot of jobs out there in the future. I think today a lot of it's based at universities, but I think more and more industry is going to be on board. Certainly, state agencies, land managers. I feel we're at the beginning, and there's lots to come.
I was going to add that pretty much every single one of these projects is highly interdisciplinary, still includes collaboration and engagement from everybody from, at least in the university, for example, from undergraduate students to full professors and things like that, but also have community engagement at multiple level. So they're partners in the research, many of them are involved in the outreach side of things. All of us are recruiting people to come and work with us and think together with us about how to make this more sustainable and go further in terms of the benefits that we can derive from these types of projects. And so, yeah, multiple ways folks can get engaged.
I think we should reiterate that last point.
We are recruiting, where everybody's welcome to help us think about this. So reach out if you're interested. And, we're always very, very happy to work with obviously people who think in creative ways. The challenge is too big for just one way of thinking on one group of individuals to be focused on it. We need everybody on the table, hands on deck kind of approach from whatever background we're coming from. And so, yep.
I actually would like to get you to expand a bit, actually for everybody to expand a bit. If you were to think of one type of person, industry, perspective that is currently missing from your projects, who do you need? So one, I'll give you a moment to think about it, and then if each of you could respond to that, I think it could be interesting for people.
I think for us, where we're finding still some limitations is in just general finance. We're having more and more, we're seeing investors kind of come to the table with interest in things like soil carbon, but they come to the then they walk away. There is a lot of money out there in philanthropy and in finance, and there is a lot of stranded assets out there in terms of climate risk. So the more we start to get the financial industry interested in these things, I think the better off we'll be. But the final thing I'll say is one industry that we've been partnering with, which is very uncommon, is we're working with the mining industry, who hasn't traditionally worked in climate or environment. And they're taking their rock dust waste product, and we're now applying that to the soil, and it's opening up an entire new market that they've never been involved in before. And so the question that I've learned is most important when I talk to a stakeholder is, what keeps you up at night? I don't go to them and say, hey, do you want to help solve climate change? I say, what keeps you up at night? And you will learn very quickly what they need to see to feel like there's value in a project. And so that's kind of been an exciting element of what we've been trying to accomplish.
I think one of the challenges we're going to face is communication to the actual people who are managing and making decisions on the ground, and putting what we learn in a really accessible and most useful format for them, so that it actually gets adopted and it actually gets used. We're scientists. We know how to do the science thing. We're going to produce answers, but whether that actually gets adopted, that's going to be the challenge, and it's going to be communications. It's going to be visualization. It's going to be some different skills from where we have strength.
I think again, there's an opportunity that we're working. Say we're academics and things like that, so we're used to going looking for grants and stuff like that. But when you're operating with small companies and things like that, they don't have that knowledge of going and looking for what is the opportunity. We don't know the knowledge what is good for market type of development. So that opportunity of having some sort of entity or something that can actually provide some of the training to some of the people that are actually trying to innovate, but they don't have the knowledge, or they don't know where to search so that they can actually be successful and continue with what they're doing. I think that's something that would be really useful.
I think my suggestion and kind of the point that I would raise is built on what they mentioned already. I think it would be wonderful to engage with more folks that can translate the science and policy implications of the work that we're doing, both for educational purposes and think, K to 12 as well as further than that, so that we can actually make this part of how we think about climate change adaptation, not just the specific results from our projects, but generally the science of what we're learning on this topic. And the other one is to figure out a way where we can get better adoption of policy from the scientific recommendations, right? So I think as scientists who've been working on this sphere for many years, we all recognize that there's a bit of a disconnect between some policy that's made on this topic as well as compared to where the science is. So I think that's a clear indication that we desperately still need people to help with communicating the science in a way that could be adopted for effective policy and policy that is likely to be adopted too.
Well, thank you all so much for joining me and joining us this morning. I hope you all, either whether you're sitting here physically or you're watching from somewhere else, enjoyed some of these takeaways. It sounds like people should come and find you at the meeting and both hear more about what you're doing in your individual centers. If they are from California, maybe there are ways that they can work with you more directly. If they're from other states, you probably have some ideas for them as to how they can do this as well and perhaps collaborate with you. I heard you kind of request science communicators, policymakers, financiers, as they exist, philanthropists, and people who are externally minded, right? That you can start building the thing, but you need people to get the message out and contribute their skills to really share this. So I hope that you have a great rest of the time at the meeting, and have a great weekend, everybody. Bye.